Hello and welcome back to another day of Dominion Prosperity Second Edition previews. This is day 2 of 3, and Donald X gets things started by saying another day, another set of previews. These are the rocks for my Sisyphus, which I'm not sure, like, who his Sisyphus is supposed to be, but maybe he's just referring to the endless nature of producing more Dominion content. But I was thinking, like, specifically because some of the cards today are treasures, like that is, or rocks are also treasure. I don't know. I don't entirely get it, but whatever. Let's look at the first card. So we're swapping out Venture for Crystal Ball. This is very much Venture leaving is very much something I expected to see. Definitely one of the least powerful cards in Prosperity, least gained cards in Prosperity. Venture is more or less a fixed adventurer, which is thematic, of course, given the names, and it's still weak. Casual players must get some fun out of it sometimes, but I could make a better one. Crystal Ball is like Venture, but it's like Loan 2, and also it can trash the estates that Loan can't and play the actions that Venture can't. So, and that was from Donald X, obviously. So yeah, Crystal Ball, 5 cost, treasure. Look at the top card of your deck. You may trash it, discard it, or if it's an action or treasure, play it. That's, it's funny because that's like, it actually, reminds me of Lookout in a way. I mean, Lookout's looking at 3 and doing each of those things rather than, well, no, it's not playing it, leaving it there, but the choices are kind of reminiscent of Lookout. But Lookout actually did survive. Anyway, so let's see if we can figure out how this card is going to work. So the trashing case basically turns it into a junk dealer equivalent. It's not exactly the same, obviously, because you get a lot less choice in what you're trashing. But in terms of cycling through your deck and econ, it's like if you're trashing the top card of your deck, that is functionally, like drawing that card and then trashing it. And then, you also get the 1 coin. I think it will compare unfavorably to Junk Dealer as a trasher. But, given that it has some other modes of operation, that's probably not so bad. And Junk Dealer is a pretty good card anyway. You also can't draw it dead, which is nice. That's usually not much of a concern with Junk Dealer because if you're going to get a Junk Dealer, you get it very early in the game, and usually not like you don't have a lot of terminal draw that you're going to draw it dead with anyway. But still, it's something. If you're just discarding it, well, you haven't accomplished too much. Like the common case for that is going to be something like you flip, province or duchy or something like that. Because given that it's an action, treasure, you're going to play it. I mean, there are going to be times when you don't want to play the action card for sure. Maybe that's common enough. That's even more common actually than, let me just skip this green card. Skipping a green card is still like pretty peddler-ish. You like, because it's happening in your buy phase, it's pretty similar to drawing the card, unless you do something else that like triggers a shuffle. That's going to be rare, but I suppose with Crystal Ball on the board, it's more likely than in the average case for a buy phase. But still, it's going to be pretty similar to drawing the card. So it's going to be pretty similar to a peddler at that point. Okay, so if it's an action or treasure, play it. So if it's a treasure and you play it, it is like Venture. And that's fine. I guess like the fact that you're going to be able to trash coppers with it, for example, should already make it better than Venture. Like, yeah, you could have another trasher on the board with Venture, And then you don't have to worry about it hitting coppers. But realistically, the odds of having a trasher are, well, they're not guaranteed, whereas with crystal ball they are. So yeah, the crystal ball has some self synergy there. So in the long run, when you're hitting copper, for the most part, you're going to be trashing it, and then in the long run, you presumably will be hitting different treasures, and that, especially, I guess, because there's not, we've just removed one of the copper junkers. Now, granted, Charlatan is sort of like a copper junker, and you can trash those curses with the crystal ball. But like, you're getting more, having something put more coppers into your deck that you didn't want is going to be less of a concern now that we've lost Mountebank. I'm trying to think if what else. Somebody had mentioned on Discord that Noble Brigand was now the best copper junker, which is, Noble Brigand is not a good card, so if that's the case, yeah, it'll be pretty rare. But okay, so Crystal Ball playing a treasure, again, it becomes pretty similar to Peddler, in the same way that Venture is, where you're essentially drawing a card, and then you get to play it. The problem with both Venture and now Crystal Ball in that mode is that it requires that you not draw your deck in order to get value out of it. The nice thing about Crystal Ball that's more like Junk Dealer is that, like, you will have already gotten value out of it even in those scenarios. Like, you get one Crystal Ball and that's your trasher, and then it will definitely run into the problem where that like Sentry runs into, for example, where you don't get the card that you need to trash into the position that you can trash it. I always have this freaking estate in my starting hand. Grr, like, that will definitely happen. But nonetheless, you will get value out of it as a trasher. And so even if you end up in the situation where it's essentially like an expensive copper and you're not like seeing a card with it, it'll still be worth getting, a copy just for the trashing. And for what it's worth, compared to Sentry, at least, the fact that it is the top card without drawing first will make it a little bit easier to set up, because there are more effects that like allow you to put a card on top of your deck than allow you to put a card underneath like the top card of your deck, essentially, or put two cards on your deck. Though on the flip side, the fact that it's a treasure means that you have to get through your action phase before you do that, or like you have to do that at the end of your action phase, perhaps, and that's going to be annoying, like, potentially, because if you have, I don't know, Harbinger or something, and you're like, oh, I'm going to set up my Crystal Ball with my Harbinger for trashing, hooray. Well, I hope you don't want to play any more actions after the Harbinger, because if you do, you probably are going to like put that card in your hand regardless. Maybe not. And given you can also play an action mode on Crystal Ball, it's even possible that it would make sense not to, specifically so that you could play that action. And speaking of actions, yeah, so the playing in action mode is definitely going to be the most like weird one to figure out. It's worth noting that this is happening before you initiate your buys, which means if you hit like a draw card and then you draw treasures, you will be able to play those treasures. Obviously, if you draw actions, you won't, unless you have Villa or whatever. So there is there's some potential for the ability to play actions, as you're playing treasures, to be good even without like specific synergies, which I'll get into in a moment. But if you play a payload card, great. if you play a draw card, that can potentially at least be all right. You can also choose to discard it instead if you don't want to play it. It is worth noting that you can't just leave it on top. So you do have to worry about like triggering undesirable shuffles with this card. So that's something to pay attention to. Like, it will always cycle the top card of your deck one way or another, whether it's because you discard it or because you play it or trash it. But yeah, so the another thing that you can do with this, specifically with Horn of Plenty, is the thing that like occurs to me right now, is you can do some gain and play stuff. So you could like play Horn of Plenty to gain a card, play Crystal Ball to play the card that your Horn of Plenty gained on the assumption that you had already drawn your deck. So that's a way that you can like be drawing your deck and still get value out of Crystal Ball's on play effect. Even like a simple case, like you have, a Workshop or an Ironworks or a Groom, or, well, maybe not Groom actually, because you could end up flipping the horse, but some of those kinds of cases, where there are going to be boards with the cards like the gainers like that, where Crystal Ball is actually going to make it easier to do gain and play than if you had Overdraw, because you don't need terminal space for it. So if you can like exactly draw your deck, and then like the last card that you play is your gainer, you can play Crystal Ball and then play the card that you gained. So there are going to be, situations like that where it's like, oh, now you don't need Overdraw, you just need enough draw. And I mean, if you have some Overdraw, you can play like the Overdraw before your gainer, and that's fine. So like, even if you bottom decked your gainer, you're still going to get to do your gain and play because of Crystal Ball. So that's cool. Yeah, so overall, this card looks pretty good to me. I mean, the trashing mode alone is like is very like, the trashing mode alone is going to make it worth investing in a lot of boards, the same way that it is for Junk Dealer. Even though it's not as good at trashing as Junk Dealer, in my opinion, it's still good, like close enough that you're going to want it a lot of the time. And then, the other stuff is kind of just gravy, I think. But there are going to be boards, like in the general case, but there are going to be boards where the gain and play potential is really good, or where you just don't have a ton of draw, and the sort of peddler mode where it's actually just like playing a card on your deck because you haven't drawn your deck is relevant. Compared to Venture, where it specifically had to be a treasure, right? That. I think this just compares like so much more favorably, because you're really only gonna have like the sad mode at the end, if you can draw your deck but you can't gain anything except in your buy phase. Probably. I mean, there are going to be times when you have plenty of terminal space, and any gain and play you can do without needing to take advantage of Crystal Ball, I guess. That'd be another case. But at that point, like, that's like a good problem to have, right? Like, at that point, your deck is just like clicking, and who cares? But yeah, so like it does what Venture did better, arguably. And then it does like all this other stuff too. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think this is a good card, and I will be interested to play with it and see. I mean, it seems pretty fun. So next up, we've got Loan being replaced by Investment. Donaldeck says, right, Loan. So Crystal Ball took over for Loan. Loan is a decent card that casual players tend not to like because it may flip over a good treasure, and I had a better version to do, hooray. Investment is another trashing treasure, this time tying into the VP tokens. You can imagine getting a bunch of VP from one of these, but it's far from trivial. Just remember, it was also a treasure that trashed stuff for you. Just remember, it was a treasure. It was also a treasure that trashed stuff for you is very much applicable to Crystal Ball. Like, you know, I mean, I kind of already said that, but yeah, if you run into the case where Crystal Ball's not really doing anything in the mid to late game, just remember it trashed your estates or whatever. Yeah, so Loan is a card that I didn't expect to get replaced. Loan is not a great card by any means, but it's fine. It's not a card that I like very much from a like I find it annoying to play with. So, you know, Donald X says that casual players tend not to like it because it may flip over a good treasure. And I get why he put it that way, because, you know, it flipping over a good treasure is not generally hurting you. In fact, it's probably in most cases helping you. Like if you're probably not getting Loan in like a really like money-ish deck in the first place. So getting a treasure off the top of your deck is probably good because it, you know, you're getting to your deck control more. You don't like generally want treasures in your opening hand. But the problem is that if you're like flipping over a good treasure does mean you're blocked from trashing your coppers. And that is annoying, and it makes it like it can make it the build order annoying, because what you really want to do is not gain any other treasures until you trashed all your coppers, and that can be difficult. It also has the you know, trashing from deck rather than hand problem. Crystal Ball will have this problem where like you know, you can't get rid of like whatever cards. The fact that it can get rid of estates will help with that, though, because it's got 10 targets to Loan's 7. So it you know, before you fully draw your deck, it's still like more likely that it has something that you haven't drawn that it can trash. But yeah, like, so Loan would have those problems. So I found it like annoying to play with from that perspective. Though it isn't a card that I thought like, oh, this needs to go. But in any case, it is gone, and I can certainly understand why, given Crystal Ball existing. And is being replaced by Investment, which is a 4-cost treasure. Trash a card from your hand, choose one, +1 coin, or trash this to reveal your hand for 1 VP per differently named treasure there. Okay. So, Investment is probably the most straightforward comparison when it's trashing cards from your hand is to like Forager. It doesn't have the buy that Forager does, but +1 coin on a stop card trasher, like, I think in terms of if you're thinking about like how much econ is it going to generate, Forager obviously doesn't always generate a coin and can generate more than 1 coin, but in the early game, the common case for Forager is certainly that it's generating 1 coin. And it's doing so non-terminally. This card is doing so non-terminally. Maybe there's a better comparison that I'm not thinking of, but yeah, I mean, it's not going to be a card that's very good at helping you hit price points, but it's going to trash, and that's usually good. So trash this to reveal your hand for +1 VP per differently named treasure there. So that seems to me like it's not going to come up very much as something that's relevant. I mean, you're going to do it because you're going to like use Investment to trash your starting cards, and then you're not going to want it in your deck anymore as a mandatory trasher that only gives you a coin when your starting cards are all gone. You know, or you're maybe if you have curses, those are all gone or whatever. So you're going to want to trigger this ability just to get it out of your deck. But, you know, how often are you going to have like a ton of treasures in your hand when you do that? Like you play this first, okay. unless Highwayman is in play, I guess. But you play this first, and oh, it's differently named treasure too. Oh, I'm sure I read it as that, but like verbally. But my brain thought per treasure in your hand, not per differently named treasure in your hand. So that's really not going to be worth very many points most of the time. Because like, how many treasures are you going to have? Maybe you get a silver, maybe you got a gold, maybe you've got like a kingdom treasure, maybe you've even got 2 or 3 kingdom treasures, and it could be worth as many as like 5 VP or something, which is like, I mean, it's fine, but and how long are you going to hold on to your investment? See, this is how the card is very on theme. Yes. How long are you going to hold on to your investment before you cash in? Right? Like, if you don't have any treasures, you're planning to get treasures, but you want to get the investment out of your deck, and so you play it and trash it, even though it's worth 0 VP. It's kind of like withdrawing money from your 401k before retirement. You get hit with the penalty, you get no VP for it. But on the other hand, if you wait until like the end of the game, now you've got this extra stop card the whole time, and I don't know, it could be pretty awkward. I mean, it might be worth it. I mean, one way to think about it would be, okay, so I held on to this card, and it's kind of like by holding on to this card, it's kind of like I've gained a green card already. Because at the point at which I play it and trash it for more VP than I could now, it becomes worth those VP. So like, if I do that on the last turn of the game, then investment essentially is a green card, rather than, especially because you're probably not even playing it for the +1 coin. So it really acts like a green card in a lot of ways. But I mean, I don't imagine that's going to come up too often, because again, like, there's a lot of boards where the variety of treasures that you have in your decking at the end of the game is pretty minimal. Like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about there being like a sort of common case for that. There's just so much variety in what you might see. But I mean, on a board that has nothing but investment and like investment and actions, and then like doesn't have colony or potion, where like the max you can get from it is, I guess, 4 if you have a second investment, though that doesn't seem like something you're going to want. So realistically 3, then it's like duchy. That's only if you hang on to a copper as well. So I mean, I think the more upside that this has in terms of like adding more variety of treasures, the more it's going to be worth holding on to. I think if you're looking at like, this is maybe eventually going to be worth 2 VP, because I'm gonna like add like a silver and a gold, probably not a good idea to hang on to it. Probably, it's going to depend, but probably. But if there is platinum, if there's spices, crystal ball, I guess, plunder, fortune, like I mean, not all of those, but some of those kinds of cards, then yeah, maybe if it's going to be worth 3, 4, 5 points, you hang on to it, and you get somewhere between a duchy and a province worth of value for that. And it's like, kind of like I said, you greened a little bit already. I imagine this is going to be a very interesting card to play with. That decision of when to cash in on the investment is going to be really interesting. So yeah, this is, I definitely think the combination of Crystal Ball and Investment compared to Venture and Loan seem way more exciting to play with. So that's really cool. All right, let's look at the last card, which is Trade Route into Clerk. Trade Route is simply a very weak trasher. It also requires coin tokens, which the set would rather not include, or would like to do a lot with, but it also had VP tokens. I'd already covered replacing the trashing part. Clerk covers being another interactive card. It's the one card Ghost Ship. It somehow ended up here instead of in Seaside. It hurts a lot less than Ghost Ship, but still hurts plenty. Okay. So, yeah, Trade Route was a slam dunk to remove probably the most, because of the coin token and the Trade Route mat considerations, probably like the most obvious remove in the set. I don't actually think, I mean, people have ragged on Trade Route for ages, and justifiably so. I don't actually think it's the weakest card in Prosperity 1E. Like, I think Venture is generally less playable than Trade Route. Like, Trade Route I will sometimes get because it is the only trashing, or the only plus buy, or both. Venture I pretty much just don't ever get. But, you know, the fact that it's weak combined with the fact that it's got its own like extra components, definitely not surprising to see it being removed, and I'm not sad to see it go. I don't really think the Trade Route like condition was all that interesting. I mean, it was mildly interesting, but I don't know. It was rare. It did happen that you would get into a situation where you would, like, some VP piles would lower and then you would pick up a Trade Route because of that. It did happen. It was rare. I'm not really too broken up about seeing that leave. Anyway, Clerk, +2 coins. Each other player with 5 or more cards in hand puts 1 onto their deck. At the start of your turn, you may play this from your hand. Huh. Okay. So you're reacting to something that happens in your own turn. That, like, it can only happen during your own turn. I think this might be the only reaction card that has that property. I mean, certainly, so reactions started very much from a design, like, concept standpoint as, like, this is a thing you can do during your opponent's turn. Moat, reacting to stuff that your opponent is doing. Ultimately, we did get to a point where Moat could react to something during your own turn with Black Cat, but that took a while. But, and it's not the only reaction that can happen. Like, even putting aside the Black Cat thing, it's not the only reaction that can take place during your turn. Certainly, like, Falconer can do that. But yeah, I think it's the only one that can only happen during your own turn. So that's neat. I mean, I like exploring the reaction space. Like, what sorts of things can we react to? At the start of your turn, this is basically just saying, like, hey, you're probably not happy that you have this card in your opening hand because it's a terminal stop card. You'd probably rather have your deck control. But if you do, well, here's a little, benefit that you get that, helps mitigate that. So, yeah, I mean, that's nice. Other than that, that's, like, definitely the most, like, whoa, part of the card, but probably not the most important part of the card. Most important part of the card is probably the, like, half Ghost Ship. Each player with 5 or more cards puts 1 onto their deck. So this attack does stack for, increased hand sizes. So there will be games where it makes sense to get more than one of these, but most of the time, you're only going to want one. Um, Unlike Ghost Ship, it doesn't draw, so it doesn't function as deck control, and it's a terminal silver. So it's the other aspects are not that exciting. So it's it is going to be comparable-ish to Militia. Um, Obviously, they're both 4 costs that generate 2 coins. I would generally say that the Militia attack is stronger, but in the early game, like in the opening in particular, if you open with this versus Militia, I could see Clerk being stronger. It obviously depends on like what hands you draw and what you're trying to buy. If you're trying to hit 5, then Militia is, well, it still depends on the sequencing. So like, for example, if you're trying to hit 5 and you have a hand of like Estate and 4 coppers and you get hit by Militia, well, Militia is not really affecting your ability to hit that 5 that you want, because you weren't going to hit 5 anyway. Clerk like might actually help you hit 5 because you can top deck a copper in that scenario if you don't want a 4 cost. And then if you do want a 4 cost, you can top deck an Estate, and then you can still get it, whereas with Militia you couldn't. On the other hand, if you top deck an Estate, you've top decked an Estate, and that sucks. So if you have 2 Estates in hand with Militia, then and get hit by Militia, then Clerk is almost certainly going to hurt more than that, unless again you really want to top deck a copper, at which point maybe you have a silver in hand and you can still hit 3, but there's a pretty good chance that you're just not doing anything with that turn if you do top deck a copper, or top deck the silver for that matter. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like top decking a card is generally going to slow you down, right, in the early game, or anytime, but especially in the early game. But there are probably going to be scenarios where top decking a card actually helps you hit the price point that you're trying to hit, because you're like, well, I don't need, it has the potential to give you some smoothing, is essentially what I'm trying to say. But then on the other hand, if you are just barely hitting the price point that you want, and it means that now you're top decking an Estate, like that potentially hurts worse than Militia. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a strong intuition for which of those is going to be more powerful in the early game. I think as the game progresses, Militia is going to be more powerful. So I guess I think overall Militia is probably stronger. But I mean, being weaker than Militia is not like a huge knock, if I'm even right about that, which I'm not sure. And the ability for this to do like alleviate some amount of terminal space is not irrelevant, especially in the opening. Opening with this and another terminal is, if it's a non-drawing terminal, you're guaranteed to be able to play both of them, because you're not going to have them collide without this being in your hand at the start of your turn. So that's that's really nice. Another thing you can do, I guess, with this card is you can get 2 copies and then use some kind of, save across your turn effect, like, save or haven or something like that, in order to guarantee that you have one in your starting hand every turn. And that will alleviate terminal space. Like if you're playing on a single terminal board with something like Save or Haven, you can set one of them aside and play it at the start of your turn, and then you can play some other terminal as your single terminal, and then you can draw the other one up set that one aside, and so on. And it almost, at that point, it's almost like a duration card with +1 action on it. Just, I don't know how often that's going to come up, but it's kind of neat. So yeah, seems to me like a good card. Like I said, I have trouble evaluating, how much weaker or stronger than it is than Militia, but I think it's going to be weaker. I think it's going to be comparable. I think it's going to sit in like a similar spot in terms of how you play it when you want it. Obviously, there will be differences, but I think it's going to be pretty comparable to that. All right. Well, that will do it for today. I think all three of these cards today look interesting and pretty good. I think Crystal Ball's probably the strongest. Investment being able to trash from your hand, though, I mean, maybe not, because you can open with Investment. And maybe Investment is actually the strongest, even though the the VP chip thing is probably not very strong or very relevant. Like, just the fact that it's a non-terminal trasher that you can open with, I mean, that's pretty good. It's not, it only gives you +1 coin, so it's let me pop that back up. Only gives you +1 coin, so like it doesn't have that good of tempo compared to a card like Priest, Moneylender, Bounty Hunter, but it is at least going to be able to, like, compared to like Forager, say, it is at least going to be able to trash a state like the first time through and still generate a coin. Or like compared to, say, Catapult, you can trash an estate and not feel bad about it. I mean, Catapult, like, obviously is stronger because the attack is really strong, but just in terms of your own deck's tempo, it's generally going to be better for your build early than Catapult, although it's a 4 cost, not a 3 cost, so that does affect what you can open with. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. They all seem like strong-ish cards to me. We'll have to see how strong, but good stuff. So thanks for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow with the final set of cards, as well as whatever errata we're getting, and until then.